I once heard someone say that if we gaze upon our circumstances, yet only glance at God, it will leave us feeling pretty hopeless. But if we only glance at our circumstances and we put our gaze upon God, then it puts everything into perspective. We tend to evaluate who God is by looking at Him through the lens of our current circumstances. But instead, we need to evaluate our current circumstances by looking at them through the lens of who we know God to be at all times. That's what the psalmist does today in our reading from Psalms 93 to 95. Psalm 93 is a hymn of confidence and of hope, declaring the Lord's reign as the King over everything, a King who he says is clothed with majesty and girded with strength. He's not just the King of a single nation either, but as the Creator of everything, He is the King over all the earth. He's the King over the universe, and therefore He is the King of every single nation. The psalmist assures us also that since He has ruled since before the beginning of time, we can be confident that He will continue to reign as King throughout all of eternity. With that confidence in mind, Psalm 94 looks at the difficult situation of God's people and cries out to God, their King, to take His seat and act as the judge over all the earth. There were powerful rulers who were crushing God's people under the weight of their oppression. They were afflicting those who were helpless. Even it says they were killing widows and orphans. And in their arrogance, they thought they could do whatever they wanted to do with no consequences, as if the Lord wasn't really God. Verse 7 says that they were saying, the Lord doesn't see what we're doing. The Lord's not even paying attention. Therefore, we won't be held accountable for what we do. But the psalmist warns the wicked that the Lord sees everything. He says in verse 9, do you really think that the one who created your ears doesn't hear what you're saying? Do you really think the one who formed your eyes doesn't see the things that you're doing? He says the Lord even knows the thoughts of the wicked, and that even though it seems like they're getting away with their wickedness, He is absolutely certain that God is still the righteous judge of the world, and that one day He will deal with the wicked and hold them completely accountable for all of their sins. And not only will He deal with the wicked, the psalmist says he is absolutely certain that God will not abandon or forsake His people. He will one day bring them final and full relief from all of their difficulty, and He will reward them for their faithfulness. He first looks to His own history. He says, if the Lord hadn't been my help in the past, I wouldn't even be alive to be trying to deal with this current difficulty. And then He looks at His ever-changing circumstances through the lens of the unchanging nature of God. He says in verse 18, if I slip, the unfailing love of God will hold me up. Verse 19, he says, when my anxious thoughts multiply within me, the strength of the Lord will also multiply within me and bring me comfort. And so he concludes that the sovereign, loving Lord, who has always been his stronghold, will continue to be his place of refuge. Psalm 95 then is a call to respond to the greatness of God, to respond to the goodness and the faithfulness of God to His people that was discussed in Psalms 93 and 94. So what is the proper response to God's greatness, His goodness, and His faithfulness? Verses 1 to 5 say, we respond by singing and shouting for joy, by coming into His presence with thanksgiving, because we remember that this Lord of unfailing love is also the great King over all the earth. Verses 6 to 7 say that we respond by bowing before Him in true worship. That means we remember that we belong to Him, that He is our God, that He is the Creator, that He is our shepherd. And when we remember who He is, and when we remember and reflect on what He's done, we surrender to Him. And even in the most difficult circumstances, we can simply trust Him to be God.